Thank you very much. My name is Anjar Priyandoyo. I'm from University of York. I'm PhD student in Environment Department. So this presentation is about my current study in the Environment Department, University of York. First, I would like to thank you for IEEE for giving me the chance to present my paper. There is some problem in the visa process, but I'm really appreciate I'm able to give presentation on this area. So my topic for today is energy and environment in Indonesia. This presentation will be divided in 5 parts: the introduction, the methodology that used in this paper, the energy in Indonesia. The fourth is on the air pollution and its impact, and the fifth is on the discussion. So I'll continue first on the what is Indonesia. I'm sure maybe one of you ever heard about Indonesia, but Indonesia is one of the biggest country. It has 4th largest population. For those who don't know Indonesia, Indonesia is located in the east. We have like 70,000 islands. We located in equator, so we have very big source of energy and very fertile soil. So what is the energy transition in Indonesia? What is the Indonesia history? If you see, the history of Indonesia is the history of exploitation of natural resources. If you see from the 700 period to now, where the Dutch built the plantation in Indonesia, until now the exploitation of coal, exploitation of oil and gas is basically exploitation of natural resources. So, so why the fact that Indonesia has abundant natural resources make this research challenging is because if you see the energy and environment in Indonesia is a bit like a paradox, because Indonesia has a large reserve of natural gas, of coal and geothermal resources, for example, but we are one of the poorest energy and poorest country in terms of the energy development. For example, we have very low electrification, very low energy usage. And also, in other hand, in environment aspect, Indonesia has known as making one of the largest pollutant from industry and also from the forest fire, if you ever heard. So this is makes a very big question on my research. What is the characteristic of energy development in Indonesia? Why this paradox is happening in Indonesia? The second part is why energy and environment is important, because there is a significant link that we try to model in this research. Is what is the link between energy and air pollution? For example, what is the link between the use of the electricity and the use of solid fuel in the population? So, and this linkage will be tried to be mapped in the energy mix scenario. So what is the best energy mix that can be used for Indonesia in the future? So that is the main themes of this research. Next is on the methodology of the research that I use. As this is the first part of the research, mainly I used literature review for this study. I used the latest paper that related with the research in Indonesia and developing country from the Scopus and Google Scholar, and try to understand the pattern of the research, energy research in Indonesia. Basically, the trend showing that in the past, Indonesia is one of the largest petroleum producer in the world, and also Indonesia is one of the reasons of the World War II in the Pacific theater, as Japan began to invade Indonesia in 1942. So this trend, if you see, is growing increase in the late 90s, as Indonesia is no longer the oil exporting country. In the past, it's part of the OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Country, but in 2004, Indonesia is no longer an exporting country. So it's, as we see that the trend of the energy research in Indonesia is begin to develop not only for the renewable, but also on the fossil fuel. As you can see, the growth of the coal energy is began sharply in this period in the 90s. So what is the finding that I can found based on the literary review is, first, Indonesia has a very low utilization of renewable energy. The current state of the renewable energy is less than like 5 or 6%, compared to the fact that Indonesia has like 40% of the largest geothermal reserve in the world, and also like the second biggest palm oil producer in the world. By sector, the distribution of the energy consumption is quite standard. It distributes 34% industrial, household, and transportation as of 2012. So I will show you the graph of the primary energy supply in Indonesia by type. As you can see that the majority of the fossil fuel that used is coal, oil, and gas. But another interesting things on the renewable energy, that the biggest source of renewable energy in Indonesia is hydro, geothermal, and biofuel. Although solar PV is one of the interesting, and wind turbine is also one of the interesting technology that can be developed in Indonesia, the price for developing this product in Indonesia is quite expensive compared to hydro and geothermal. As maybe you might know that Indonesia is home of like 200 active volcanoes in the world. So in the industrial sector, the trend is quite stagnant, I would say. There is growth in the Indonesian sector like 4 or 5% each year, where in the last decade, the industry that provide most of the growth is the cement, fertilizer, and food is the biggest industry. But in the future, in the last decade, the most industry that you consume energy is under chemical and metal industry. This is the final consumption in the industrial sector. As you can see, the average growth is like 4.5%. Household sector is also an interesting case in Indonesia, because the 40% of the population still rely on the biomass, still using traditional stove, using burnt wood. But there are some transition in the energy in the household sector, especially in the domestic. There are some shifting from the use of kerosene into the use of LPG. So between 2002 and 2007, there are massive transition involving like 50 million of population to use the LPG instead of the kerosene. Okay, this is the distribution of the final energy consumption in the household sector. It's like 71% use the biomass, and the rest is using the kerosene and the LPG. Power generation sector is also one of the interesting finding in this research, because the coal power plant, as Indonesia is one of the biggest coal exporter in the world, has the biggest share, like 40% of the power plant is using coal, with the growth like 90%, 99%. After that, the other source of the energy for power generation is gas and diesel. Developing the power generation in Indonesia is interesting, especially with the concept of one grid, because with the 70,000 islands, it's difficult to connect one island to another island in the same grid. And that is from the energy side. The other interesting thing is from the environment side, which is the air pollution. Based on the data showing the trend like the last 10 or 20 years, it shows the increasing number of air pollution in Indonesia, the increasing number of CO2, NO2, and methane in Indonesia projected this like it can be increased. The growth is bigger than the economic growth. Greenhouse gas also contributing one of the biggest in the world. And another thing is the forest fire that regularly happen because of the monsoon wind, because of the El Nino, is making one of the Indonesia as the one of the most polluted country. So this is the transition between 1990 2010 on the greenhouse gas sector. And another thing is from the particulate matter. Particulate matter is in the air pollution, such as from the transportation. The trend is also increasing in number of. There are some study in number of city in Indonesia that the trend of the particulate matter is increasing in the recent decade. So based on this finding, it leads to interesting discussion. The first is the biggest challenge in design energy policy in Indonesia is on the geographical challenge, because there are a large number of islands where each island has different characteristic. For example, there are like 30% of island that has volcano, so it can be very optimal for geothermal, but another island has no. For example, Kalimantan, one of the biggest islands, has no volcano at all, and some of island is not optimal for the wind turbine because the wind is very small. So designing policy on the country level in Indonesia is very difficult, especially due to the geographical challenge. The second is on the prioritization of the energy source challenge, because Indonesia has both the fossil fuel and also has large renewable energy. The problem is when the local government and the central government, when they're deciding the priority for the energy development, can be quite challenging. And the second part, the finding of this research, is on the implementation challenge. Indonesia is planned to shift from the fossil fuel to the renewable energy since like in the early 2000, but the problem is the implementation of the policy is on the ineffective monitoring, especially after 1997 financial crisis. The monitoring of the policy and enforcement policy in Indonesia is very difficult. And the other thing is that the challenge is on the environmental challenge. For example, how to align between energy policy from the Ministry of Energy and the environment policy from environmental ministry that sometimes not aligned. So it makes difficult to make effective policy. And the last in the implementation challenge is the matter of the governance. Governance is on which institution that should perform monitoring and also which institution should perform the enforcement. It's difficult because the situation involving the central government and the local government. So those three challenges is based on my literature review, and therefore I will translate it into the scenario analysis to deciding what is the impact of each policy, what is the impact of the renewable energy policy versus the impact of the fossil fuel energy policy. Based on that analysis, then we can decide what is the impact of that policy to environment. That's all from my side. Thank you very much.